Hey there. Tonight we're going to explore a quiet question that has echoed through the centuries. Was the Virgin Queen really a virgin? It's a question whispered in the corridors of power back then, and one we can ponder now as you get comfortable and ready to drift off. It's always so wonderful to see where our fellow history travelers are settling in for the night, so feel free to leave a comment with where you're listening from, and perhaps consider subscribing if you enjoy these calm journeys into the past. Because beyond the simple yes or no lies a much more fascinating story of power, love, and the secrets of a queen's private life. So let's go back. Imagine yourself in the half-light of a Tudor palace, the air thick with the scent of beeswax, wood smoke, and damp wool. The world outside is dark, but here, inside the labyrinthine walls of Whitehall or Greenwich, a different kind of darkness gathers in the corners, a darkness filled with secrets and speculation. You are a courtier, perhaps, or a lady in waiting, someone of little consequence who is paid to see everything and say nothing. You exist in the periphery, your life governed by the rising and setting of a single, brilliant sun, the Queen, Elizabeth. And the question of her body, her marriage, her future, is not just idle gossip. It is the central, obsessive question of the age. It is the engine of politics, the subject of ambassadors' secret letters, the fear that keeps privy councillors awake at night. For a kingdom, in this era, is not just land and laws, it is a body. And the body of the monarch, their physical, mortal body, is inextricably fused with the body of the state, the body politic. The health of one is the health of the other. The succession of one is the survival of the other. And so, the Queen's womb was not her own. It was a vessel of state, a public asset, the single most important piece of political real estate in all of England. Every aspect of her physical life was subject to a level of scrutiny that is almost impossible for us to comprehend. It's like living your entire life with the board of directors not just in your office, but in your bedroom, in your bathroom, commenting on your diet, your sleep schedule, your choice of companions. It was suffocating. And at the heart of this suffocating scrutiny was a paradox. To secure the future of her country, she had to marry and produce an heir. But to marry was to surrender her power, to become subservient to a husband, whether a foreign prince who would drag England into continental wars, or an English nobleman who would create factional strife and jealousy at home. To marry was to cease to be the sun and to become a moon, reflecting the light of a king. Elizabeth understood this from the very beginning. She had seen what marriage did to queens. Her own mother, Anne Boleyn, had been destroyed by her failure to produce a male heir for a king who grew tired of her. Her half-sister, Mary, had married Philip of Spain, and in her desperate phantom pregnancies and her devotion to a foreign husband, had brought England to its knees, earning the name Bloody Mary. Elizabeth was a scholar of her own family's disastrous history. She had learned her lessons in the hardest of schools, in the Tower of London, under house arrest, watching her loved ones, her friends, her mother, fall to the executioner's axe. She had learned that for a woman in power, love was a trap and marriage was a cage. And so she chose a third path, a radical, almost unthinkable path. She would not marry. She would be both king and queen, mother and father to her people. She would bind herself not to a man, but to England itself. In a famous speech to Parliament, she declared, "I am already bound unto a husband, which is the kingdom of England," and she would hold up her coronation ring, the symbol of this mystical marriage. But to maintain this fragile, unprecedented state of affairs, she had to construct a persona, the persona of the Virgin Queen. It wasn't just a statement of fact, or even a lie. It was a piece of political theater, a brand, a myth. It transformed her physical state, her unmarried status, from a weakness, a dynastic dead end, into a source of immense, almost supernatural power. She was Gloriana, Diana, the moon goddess, untouchable, set apart, dedicated solely to her nation. It was a brilliant strategy, but it was a strategy that required a lifetime of performance, a lifetime of saying no, a lifetime of walking a tightrope between public purity and private desire. And that is where our story truly begins, in the space between the myth and the woman, between the Virgin Queen and Elizabeth Tudor. And in that space, there was a man. His name was Robert Dudley. The air in a Tudor palace, as you drift deeper into this world, is a complex thing. It's not the clean, filtered air of our time. It's a tapestry of smells. In the great hall, the dominant notes are wood smoke from the vast, roaring fireplace and the lingering scent of roasted meats from the last meal. Add to that the smell of hundreds of unwashed bodies, perfumed to mask the reality, the faint sweetness of spilled wine on the flagstones, and the dusty, dry scent of the rushes strewn on the floor, which were meant to absorb filth, but often just trapped it. As you move through the winding corridors, the smell changes. Near the kitchens, it's a blast of heat, grease, baking bread, and boiling vegetables. In the private chambers of the wealthy, you might catch the expensive, exotic scent of burning incense, or the floral notes of pomanders, oranges studded with cloves, that people carried to ward off the foul miasmas they believed caused disease. And then there is the pervasive, underlying scent of damp, the cold, wet chill that seeps from the stone walls, especially in winter. It's a dampness that gets into your clothes, into your bones. It's the smell of a world without central heating, a world where you are never truly deeply warm unless you are huddled right next to the fire. And it is in this world that Elizabeth and Robert Dudley grew up. They knew each other from childhood, two privileged children moving in the same rarefied, dangerous circles of the court. Robert was the son of John Dudley, the Duke of Northumberland, one of the most powerful men in England during the reign of Elizabeth's younger brother, Edward VI. He was handsome, athletic, charming. He was exactly 1 day older than Elizabeth. This small fact seemed to create a strange, unspoken twinship between them. They were playmates, companions, confidants, in a world where true friendship was a dangerous currency. They learned to ride together, to hawk, to dance. Robert was a superb horseman, a skill that Elizabeth, herself a fearless rider, deeply admired. Imagine them as teenagers, galloping across the royal parks, the wind in their faces, momentarily free from the rigid formality and constant observation of court life. In these moments, they were not a future queen and a duke's son. They were just Bess and Robin, two people who understood each other without words. Their bond, however, was forged not in the sunshine of the hunt, but in the darkness of the Tower of London. When Elizabeth's Catholic sister, Mary I, took the throne, the Protestant Dudleys were prime targets. Robert's father was executed for treason. Robert himself, along with his brothers, was imprisoned in the Tower, condemned to death. And soon after, Elizabeth, accused of plotting against her sister, was sent to the Tower as well. The Tower of London was not a single building. It was a fortress, a palace, a prison, a cold, grim stone city within a city. To be sent there was terrifying. It was often a one-way trip. And for a time, both Elizabeth and Robert Dudley were trapped within its walls, living under the shadow of the executioner's block. They were held in different parts of the complex, but they knew the other was there. They shared the same fear, the same uncertainty. This shared trauma, this baptism of fear, bonded them in a way that nothing else could. They were survivors of the same shipwreck. When they were both eventually released, Elizabeth to a dreary house arrest in the countryside, Robert to fight as a soldier of fortune in Europe, that bond remained. It was a thread connecting them across distance and time. So when Mary died in 1558 and Elizabeth, at the age of 25, rode into London to be crowned queen, one of her very first acts was to honor Robert Dudley. She made him her master of the horse. It was a prestigious position, granting him control of the royal stables. But more importantly, it was a position of immense personal intimacy. The master of the horse was constantly at the monarch's side. He helped her mount and dismount her horse. He rode beside her in processions. He was a constant, visible presence. And Elizabeth did not just give him the job, she flaunted her affection for him. In the very first days of her reign, in front of the entire court, she was seen to tickle his neck. She called him her eyes and her sweet Robin. They were always together, laughing, whispering, sharing private jokes. Their body language screamed a level of intimacy that shocked and scandalized the court. It was too familiar, too casual, too real. This wasn't the distant, formal relationship of a queen and her subject. This looked like love, and everyone saw it. The Spanish ambassador, a man paid to observe and report on every nuance of the English court, wrote home in a state of barely concealed panic, saying that it was as if she were married to him. He reported that they spent hours together, that she visited him in his chambers, that the Lord Dudley was so favored, it seemed he did what he liked with the kingdom's affairs. The problem, of course, was that Robert Dudley was already married. His wife's name was Amy Robsart, and she is the ghost at the heart of this story. She was the inconvenient background fact that made the Queen's open affection for Robert so deeply scandalous. Amy was a gentlewoman, the daughter of a Norfolk squire. She and Robert had married for love, it seems, when they were both just teenagers. Theirs was not a grand, dynastic match, but a genuine, youthful romance. In the early years of their marriage, they lived a quiet, provincial life. But Robert was ambitious. He was a Dudley. The pull of the court, the center of all power and patronage, was irresistible. As his star rose under the new queen, Amy was left behind. She was not a creature of the court. She was quiet, pious, and increasingly unwell. She suffered from what was described at the time as a malady in the breast, which modern historians suspect may have been breast cancer. She lived a solitary life in a series of rented houses, far from the glamour and intrigue of London. She was, in essence, the forgotten wife. While her husband flirted and laughed and rode beside the most powerful woman in the world, Amy managed their household accounts, ordered supplies, and waited for letters that rarely came. You can imagine her loneliness, the quiet echo in the halls of Cumnor Place, the house she was leasing near Oxford. She would hear the distant rumors, the gossip that trickled down from London about her husband and the Queen. The whole country was talking about it. Servants would whisper. Neighbors would exchange knowing glances. It must have been a quiet, private humiliation. And for Elizabeth and Robert, Amy was the great obstacle. As long as she was alive, any fantasy of marriage was just that, a fantasy. But divorce was all but impossible. A messy, scandalous affair that would require an act of Parliament and rake up all the mud of Robert's public dalliance with the Queen. It would be a political disaster, and so they waited. The court watched and waited. The ambassadors wrote their dispatches and waited. The whole of England seemed to be holding its breath. And then, on Sunday, September 8th, 1560, the obstacle was removed. On that day, Amy Dudley gave all her servants the day off to visit a local fair. She insisted they go, even when some were reluctant to leave her alone. When they returned that evening, they found the house silent. They called her name, and then they found her, lying at the bottom of a short, steep flight of stairs. Her neck was broken. The news traveled like a shockwave. Amy Robsart was dead. Robert Dudley was free. The Queen could, in theory, now marry her favorite. But the death was too convenient, too neat. The timing was, to put it mildly, suspect. Immediately, the whispers turned from gossip about an affair to dark speculation about murder. Did she fall? Was it an accident? She was known to be ill. Perhaps a dizzy spell, a moment of weakness on the stairs. This was the official story. Or did she, in her despair and loneliness, take her own life? The coroner's inquest would later rule out suicide, but the possibility hung in the air. Or was it something far more sinister? Had Robert, seeing his path to the throne blocked only by this one inconvenient woman, arranged to have her removed? Had someone, acting on his behalf, or even believing they were acting on his wishes, pushed her? The scandal was immediate and catastrophic. It didn't matter what the truth was. In the court of public opinion, Robert Dudley was a murderer and an adulterer, and the Queen was his accomplice. John Appleyard, Amy's own half-brother, would later declare that he was convinced she had been murdered, though he would change his story several times, likely under pressure or for profit. The Queen herself, a master of political calculation, understood the damage instantly. She immediately distanced herself from Robert, sending him away from court and ordering a full inquest into Amy's death. She knew that to marry him now, in the shadow of this scandal, would be to confirm the darkest rumors. It would destroy her reputation, her authority, her carefully constructed image. It would be political suicide. The death of Amy Robsart, the very event that should have cleared the path for their love, instead became the tombstone of their marriage prospects. The scandal clung to Robert Dudley for the rest of his life, a permanent stain on his name. He was now, in the eyes of many, toxic. And Elizabeth, the pragmatic queen, could never marry a man so tainted. The ghost of Amy would always stand between them. And so, the question of their physical relationship becomes even more fraught, more complex. Did they consummate their love before Amy's death? Or after? Or never? Let's imagine the texture of their relationship in those first 2 years of her reign, before the tragedy at Cumnor Place. You are a fly on the wall, or perhaps a thread in the tapestry of Greenwich Palace. The Queen's days are a whirlwind of public performance. She meets with her Privy Council, a room full of serious, older men in dark velvets and furs, men like William Cecil, her shrewd and cautious principal secretary. They discuss matters of state, the currency, the religious settlement, the threat from Scotland, the ambitions of France. They press her, constantly, on the issue of her marriage. They present lists of suitable foreign princes. They lecture her on her duty. Her face is a mask of serene authority. She listens patiently. She asks intelligent questions. She defers. She promises to consider it. She plays for time, a game she will master over the next several decades. This is the public Elizabeth. Grave, intelligent, regal. Then, the council meeting ends. The old men bow and retreat, and Robert Dudley enters the room, and the atmosphere changes instantly. The air thins. The light seems to shift. The Queen's mask drops. Her face, which a moment ago was impassive, lights up. She smiles a real, unguarded smile. He bows, but it's the bow of an intimate, not just a subject. There's a familiarity in his eyes, a shared history. He is the master of the horse, and he has come to discuss the new shipment of coursers from Italy, or the plans for the next royal progress. But that is just the pretext. They talk about horses, yes, but their conversation drifts. They laugh at a shared memory. He tells a bawdy joke he heard in the stables, and she playfully scolds him, though her eyes are dancing. He is the only one who can make her laugh like that. He is the only one who doesn't seem to be terrified of her. To him, she is not just Gloriana, the untouchable monarch. She is still, in some small, protected part of his heart, Bess, his Bess. Their intimacy is a physical thing. She will tap his arm with her long, elegant fingers to make a point. He will stand just a little too close to her, their shoulders almost touching as they look at a map. They have their own world, their own language of glances and gestures that excludes everyone else. The ladies in waiting, mending clothes in the corner of the room, pretend not to watch, but they see everything. They see the way her gaze follows him as he moves across the room. They hear the low, intimate murmur of their voices, and they whisper. In the evenings, there is dancing. The great hall is filled with the sound of lutes and viols. Elizabeth loves to dance. She is energetic, graceful, and tireless. And her favorite partner, always, is Robert. When they dance a volta, a vigorous, spinning dance, he lifts her high in the air, and for a moment, she is weightless, her feet off the ground, her brocaded skirts flying. In that moment, she is not a queen bearing the weight of a nation on her shoulders. She is a woman in the arms of the man she loves. It is in these public displays that the rumors are born. But what about the private moments? The moments no one is meant to see. The Spanish ambassador, de Quadra, writes in his secret letters to King Philip of Spain that Dudley is so favored that he visits the Queen in her bedchamber at all hours. Is this true? Or is it the fevered speculation of a worried diplomat, eager to report the worst? A queen's bedchamber was not the private sanctuary we might imagine. It was a semi-public space. It had an outer chamber, a presence chamber, and then the inner sanctum, the privy chamber, where she slept. This area was guarded by her most trusted ladies-in-waiting, women from noble families who were her companions, her dressers, her gatekeepers. For a man to enter the privy chamber would be a shocking breach of protocol. It would be political dynamite. And yet, the rumors persisted. Stories circulated of a secret passageway connecting Robert's apartments to the Queen's. There was talk of a secret marriage, a secret child. Most of this was pure fantasy, the stuff of tavern gossip. But the smoke suggests a fire. Perhaps he didn't stride into her bedroom every night. But could they have found moments to be truly alone? A quiet corner of the garden after dusk? A secluded room in a hunting lodge during a royal progress? They were creative, intelligent people, surrounded by a court that, while watchful, was also full of people loyal to one or the other of them. It was not impossible, and the question remains, if they were in love, and they had the opportunity, would they have resisted? Elizabeth had built her life around control of her emotions, her image, her kingdom. But she was also a passionate woman, with a deep capacity for love and affection, a capacity that had been thwarted and damaged by her traumatic youth. In Robert, she found a safe harbor. He was the one person she didn't have to control, the one person she could be vulnerable with. And that vulnerability may have been a temptation too powerful to resist. We will never know for sure. There are no diary entries, no love letters that survive to tell the tale. All we have is the speculation of others, the whispers, the knowing glances, and the stark, undeniable fact of their public intimacy, an intimacy that shouted a love they could never officially admit. And then came the news from Cumnor Place, and everything changed forever. The whispers became accusations, and the dream of a life together turned into a nightmare of scandal and suspicion. The inquest into Amy Robsart's death was, on the surface, thorough. A jury was assembled, witnesses were interviewed, and a verdict was reached. The official finding was misfortune, accidental death, a tragic fall. But from the very beginning, the process was clouded by the involvement of the man at the center of the storm, Robert Dudley himself. From his self-imposed exile from court, he wrote frantic letters, micromanaging the investigation. He insisted on a jury of discreet and substantial men. He urged them to be thorough, to leave no stone unturned, so that the truth might be found out and his name cleared. But his very eagerness, his desperate attempt to control the narrative, looked suspicious. It was like a man accused of a crime volunteering to oversee the police investigation. It stank of a cover-up, and there were troubling details. The coroner was a known associate of one of Robert's men. Key witnesses gave conflicting accounts. Amy's own maid, a Mrs. Pinto, was reported to have said that Amy had been praying to God to be delivered from desperation, which could suggest suicidal thoughts. But this same maid was not called to testify at the official inquest. Why? It all felt a little too neat, a little too clean. The verdict of misfortune was the least politically damaging outcome for everyone involved. It absolved Robert of murder and Amy of the sin of suicide, which would have meant she couldn't be buried in consecrated ground. It was a tidy solution, but it convinced no one. The scandal had its own momentum now. Ballads were being sung in the streets of London, crude poems accusing the gypsy, a common nickname for the dark-complexioned Dudley, of killing his wife to marry the Queen. It became a piece of folk history, a dark fairy tale, and Elizabeth was trapped. Her heart may have longed to rush to Robert's side, to comfort him, to believe in his innocence. But her head, the cool, calculating mind of a ruler, knew that the scandal had made him radioactive. To marry him now would be to legitimize the rumors, to confirm to her people and to the world that she was a home-wrecking adulteress who had conspired with her lover to murder his wife. Her reign would be over before it had truly begun. So she kept him at a distance, for a time. But she could not bear to be without him for long. He was her anchor, her constant. Slowly, carefully, he was brought back into favor. He was given new titles, new lands. In 1564, she made him the Earl of Leicester, a powerful new title. He was once again at the center of the court, once again her closest companion. But something had been broken. The innocent, joyful quality of their early affection was gone, replaced by something more complex, more melancholic. The ghost of Amy Robsart now walked the corridors of the palace with them. Her death had created a chasm between them that could never be fully bridged, and so began the next phase of Elizabeth's great political performance, the marriage game. If she could not marry the man she loved, she would use the possibility of marrying other men as a powerful tool of diplomacy. It was a game she would play with consummate skill for the next 20 years. The list of suitors was long and at times faintly ridiculous. It was a parade of the most eligible, and sometimes the most unsuitable, bachelors in Europe. There was King Philip II of Spain, her former brother-in-law, the most powerful Catholic monarch in the world, a man who had been married to her sister Mary. It was a politically astute offer, but for Elizabeth, it was unthinkable. To marry the widower of Bloody Mary would have been a betrayal of everything her reign stood for. She turned him down with exquisite politeness. There was King Eric XIV of Sweden, a handsome, romantic, but notoriously unstable figure. He sent lavish embassies, spent a fortune on gifts, and threatened to come to England in person to press his suit, much to the alarm of Elizabeth's council. She skillfully kept him dangling for years, accepting his portraits and his poems, without ever saying yes. It was like a long-distance relationship where one person is deeply invested and the other is just keeping their options open. Then there were the Habsburgs, the Archdukes Charles and Ferdinand of Austria. They were Catholic, which was a major problem, but they were powerful. Long, tedious negotiations dragged on for years over the issue of whether a potential husband would be allowed to practice his own religion in private. Elizabeth used these negotiations to keep the Habsburgs friendly, to prevent them from allying with her enemies. It was a masterful display of diplomatic stalling. Each suitor was a pawn in her game. The possibility of her hand in marriage was a prize she dangled in front of the rulers of Europe, a way to forge alliances, sow division among her enemies, and buy herself time. All the while, Robert Dudley, the Earl of Leicester, had to stand by and watch. It must have been a unique form of torture. He had to entertain the ambassadors of his rivals. He had to watch as the Queen danced with a French prince, or read a flattering letter from an Austrian archduke. He, who considered himself her true partner, was forced to be a spectator in the public auction of her hand. The most serious of these courtships, the one that came closest to actually happening, was with a French prince, François, the Duke of Anjou and Alençon. He was more than 20 years younger than Elizabeth. He was short, pockmarked, and by all accounts, not a particularly handsome man. But he was the brother of the King of France, and an alliance with France was a powerful strategic goal for England, a way to counterbalance the might of Spain. Elizabeth, now in her 40s, seemed genuinely fond of him. She gave him a pet name, her Frog. Their courtship was a bizarre, public spectacle. He came to England, and they were seen walking in the gardens, deep in conversation. She was flirtatious, charming, and seemed to be seriously considering it. The court was in an uproar. Her council was divided. The public was horrified at the thought of a French Catholic king. Protestant preachers thundered from the pulpits against the match. A man named John Stubbs wrote a fiery pamphlet titled, "The Discovery of a Gaping Gulf Whereinto England is Like to be Swallowed by Another French Marriage," for which he had his right hand chopped off in a grim public punishment. But Elizabeth pressed on. Was she serious? Or was it the most elaborate piece of political theater she had ever staged? It's hard to say. Perhaps, in her middle age, she had a final pang of longing for a normal life, for a husband, and perhaps even a child. Perhaps she was genuinely charmed by the young Duke's Gallic flair. Or perhaps she was simply playing the game to its absolute limit, squeezing every last drop of diplomatic advantage out of it. The climax came in a dramatic, almost theatrical scene. In front of the entire court, she kissed the Duke of Anjou on the lips and announced that he would be her husband. The court was stunned into silence. The French ambassador began preparing triumphant dispatches. It seemed, for a moment, that the Virgin Queen was finally going to marry. And then, overnight, she changed her mind. After a sleepless night, supposedly spent weeping and being lectured by her weeping ladies-in-waiting and her most trusted advisors, she emerged the next morning and called it all off. She told the heartbroken Duke that she could not, in the end, go through with it. She had to choose her people over her own happiness. It was a masterful performance of self-sacrifice. She had demonstrated her willingness to marry for the good of the state, thus satisfying her council, and then had backed out due to her overwhelming love for her people, thus satisfying the public. She got all the diplomatic benefits of the proposed alliance, without having to actually pay the price of a foreign husband. It was a political checkmate, and it was the last time she would seriously entertain a foreign match. After the Anjou affair, the marriage game was over. She had outlasted all her suitors. She had entered middle age, and the biological window for producing an heir was closing. The court and the country began to slowly, reluctantly, accept that she would never marry. She would live and die a virgin, at least in public. And as the prospect of a real marriage faded, the cult of the Virgin Queen grew even stronger. It was as if, having rejected all mortal husbands, she was now fully committed to her mystical marriage with England. Poets and artists began to celebrate her in allegorical terms. She was no longer just a queen, she was a symbol. She was Astraea, the virgin goddess of justice from classical mythology, who had returned to Earth to bring a new golden age. She was Diana, the chaste goddess of the moon. She was the Vestal Virgin of the West. This was not just flattery. It was a sophisticated propaganda campaign, orchestrated by her government and embraced by her people. It turned her greatest political liability, her unmarried, childless state, into her greatest asset. It created a powerful, unifying national myth. The portraits of this era show a figure who is becoming less and more than human. Her clothes become ever more elaborate, vast structures of silk and velvet, studded with jewels and pearls, symbols of her purity and wealth. Her face becomes a pale, emotionless mask, the mask of youth, which barely aged over the next 20 years. She was being transformed from a woman into an icon, a living embodiment of England itself, untouchable, incorruptible, and eternal. But behind the icon, behind the mask, there was still a woman who had, for the sake of her kingdom, given up the man she loved and the chance of a family. And that woman's heart still belonged to Robert Dudley. While Elizabeth was playing her grand diplomatic game with the crowned heads of Europe, Robert Dudley, the Earl of Leicester, was trying to live his own life. It was a life lived in the brilliant, unforgiving glare of the Queen's favor, a gilded cage from which he could never truly escape. He remained her closest companion, her most trusted advisor on many matters, her sweet Robin. Their bond, forged in childhood and trauma, was too deep to be broken by scandal or political necessity. They had a rhythm, a way of being together, that was the constant backdrop to the ever-changing drama of the court. Imagine a quiet evening at Hampton Court. The day's business is done. The petitioners have gone. The ambassadors have bowed their way out. Elizabeth is in her privy chamber, a smaller, more intimate room, warmed by a crackling fire. Her ladies-in-waiting are there, but they are in the background, sewing or reading quietly. They are part of the furniture. And Leicester is there. He is reading to her, perhaps a new poem by Philip Sidney, or a passage from a classical text. His voice is low and steady. She is listening, her head tilted, one of her long fingers tracing the pattern on the damask of her chair. They are not talking about politics, or marriage, or succession. They are simply existing in each other's presence, a comfortable silence between them that speaks volumes more than words. This was the texture of their relationship for years. A deep, abiding, but ultimately platonic friendship. Or was it? The truth is, we don't know. They were masters of discretion. After the Amy Robsart scandal, they knew they were being watched. Whatever physical intimacy they may have shared in the first flush of her reign would have been curtailed by brutal necessity. But was it extinguished entirely? Or did it simply become more secret, more carefully guarded? The rumors never completely went away. There were whispers of secret pregnancies, of children spirited away to the countryside. One persistent story claimed that Elizabeth had a son with Dudley, a boy named Arthur Dudley who was raised in obscurity. A man claiming to be this son would surface years later, but his claims were never substantiated and were almost certainly the work of a fantasist or a con man. These stories are almost certainly untrue. A royal pregnancy is not something that could have been easily hidden from the prying eyes of the court, especially from her ladies-in-waiting who attended her every physical need. But the persistence of these rumors shows how unbelievable the public found the official narrative. The idea that this passionate queen and her handsome, beloved favorite could have spent 30 years in each other's constant company without ever succumbing to temptation seemed, to many, to defy human nature. But Robert Dudley was a man, not a myth. He wanted a family. He wanted an heir to carry on his name and inherit his vast fortune. And it was clear, by the 1570s, that the Queen was never going to marry him. And so, he did something that was both perfectly understandable and incredibly foolish. He fell in love with someone else. Her name was Lettice Knollys, and she was, of all things, the Queen's first cousin once removed. She was the daughter of Catherine Carey, who was the daughter of Mary Boleyn, Anne Boleyn's sister. This meant that Lettice was Elizabeth's close blood relative, and to make matters worse, she bore a striking resemblance to the Queen in her youth, with the same red-gold hair and sharp intelligence. But Lettice was everything the Queen was not. She was vivacious, openly sensual, and fertile. She had been married before, to the Earl of Essex, and had several children. When her husband died, she was a beautiful, powerful, and available widow. And Leicester, now in his 40s, was captivated by her. They began an affair, and in 1578, secretly, they married. For a year, they managed to keep it a secret from the Queen. They knew, with absolute certainty, what her reaction would be. It was one thing for Robert to have a discreet affair. It was another thing entirely for him to marry, to give another woman the legal and public status that Elizabeth had denied herself. It was a betrayal of their unique, unspoken pact, and it was a betrayal with her own cousin. The news, when it finally broke, was delivered to the Queen by the French ambassador's envoy, a man who was Leicester's bitter rival. He delivered the news with relish. The Queen's reaction was volcanic. She exploded in a fury that terrified the court. She screamed that she would have Leicester thrown in the Tower. She referred to Lettice as that she-wolf. She banished Lettice from court permanently. Lettice Knollys would never be received in the Queen's presence again for the rest of her long life. It was a personal, vicious, and permanent excommunication. The Queen's rage was not just about politics. It was the rage of a woman spurned. It revealed, in one shocking flash, the true depth of her feelings for Leicester. She may not have been able to marry him herself, but she could not bear the thought of him belonging to another. She considered him hers, her possession, her Robin. This was not the reaction of a monarch to a disobedient subject. This was the primal fury of jealousy. Leicester was, for a time, in disgrace. But even this could not break their bond. After a period of exile from her presence, he was slowly, inevitably, forgiven. He was too important to her. He was part of her. She could not cut him out of her life any more than she could cut out her own heart. He returned to court, and their strange, complicated relationship resumed. But now there were three people in their non-marriage. There was Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen. There was Robert, her eternal favorite. And there was the shadow of Lettice, his wife, the she-wolf, living on her country estates, banished from the sun of the Queen's presence, but holding the title of Countess of Leicester, a title that should have been, in a different world, Elizabeth's. It was a melancholy, tangled, and deeply human situation, played out on the grand stage of the English court. As Elizabeth and Robert moved into the autumn of their lives, the nature of their relationship continued to evolve. The fiery passion of their youth and the painful drama of his secret marriage settled into a kind of deep, quiet companionship. He remained her constant, the one fixed point in her turning world. By now, most of the men who had been with her at the beginning of her reign were gone. Old advisors like William Cecil were aging and frail. New, younger faces were appearing at court. Ambitious young men who had not known her as a young woman, who had not shared the terror of the Tower. To them, she was a monument, a living legend. But to Robert, she was still Bess. They were two old soldiers who had survived a long and brutal war together. They shared a universe of memories that no one else could access. Imagine them on a cold afternoon, walking slowly in the gardens at Richmond. The air is crisp, the leaves are turning, They are both in their 50s. His dark beard is streaked with gray. Her famous red hair is now a wig, her face artfully painted to conceal the lines of age and worry. They walk slowly. Perhaps he offers her his arm for support. Their conversation is not the flirtatious banter of their youth. It's quieter, more reflective. They might talk about his son from his marriage to Lettice, a bright young boy also named Robert, who was the Queen's godson. The Queen, who had no children of her own, was fond of the boy, though she could never bring herself to forgive his mother. Or they might reminisce about the old days, about people long dead, about the dangers they had faced and overcome. There is a deep comfort in their shared history, a sense of two people who know each other so completely that there is no need for pretense. But even in this late stage, the question of their physical intimacy lingers. Did it cease entirely? Or did it, perhaps, find a different kind of expression? In an age without modern medicine, physical ailments were a constant companion. People aged quickly and often painfully. Elizabeth suffered from migraines, toothaches, and other ailments. Robert was often plagued by stomach troubles. Perhaps their intimacy became one of caregiving, the quiet application of a cool cloth to a fevered brow, the sharing of a medicinal tonic, the simple, comforting presence of a loved one during a night of pain. This kind of physical care, in a world where touch was often formal and ritualized, could be its own form of profound intimacy. And Elizabeth, for all her iconic status, remained a woman who craved male companionship and admiration. As Leicester aged, new, younger favorites emerged to catch her eye. There was the handsome Sir Christopher Hatton, who was said to have first won her favor through his elegant dancing. He became a fixture at court, a devoted, lovesick courtier who never married and seemed to exist only to adore her. She called him her lids and her sheep. Then, most famously, there was Robert Devereux, the Earl of Essex. He was the son of Lettice Knollys, which made him Robert Dudley's stepson. He was dashing, arrogant, ambitious, and impossibly handsome. He stormed into court like a romantic hero, and the aging queen was utterly captivated by him. Their relationship was a stormy, passionate, and ultimately tragic affair. It was more like that of a doting grandmother and a spoiled, rebellious grandson than that of lovers. She indulged him, she scolded him, she showered him with favor, and he, in turn, was often petulant, demanding, and disrespectful. He once famously turned his back on her in a fit of pique, an almost unthinkable insult for which she boxed his ears. He, in turn, clapped his hand to his sword, a shocking gesture of defiance. It was a turbulent, unhealthy relationship, a pale imitation of the deep, steady bond she shared with Leicester. Leicester, in his later years, had to watch this new favorite, his own stepson, command the Queen's attention. It must have been galling, but he was older now, and perhaps wiser. He had his own life, his own family, even if his wife was banished from court. He took on the role of an elder statesman. He even tried to advise the hot-headed young Essex, to guide him, to warn him against provoking the Queen's temper. It was a strange, tangled family drama. The Queen, her old love, and her new favorite, who was the son of the woman her old love had married. It's the kind of complicated, messy, emotional entanglement that would feel at home in a modern soap opera, but this was playing out at the very center of English power. And yet, through it all, her bond with Leicester remained the bedrock. He was the one she trusted to lead her armies. When the Spanish Armada threatened England in 1588, it was Leicester she appointed to be Lieutenant and Captain General of the Queen's armies and companies. He was to command the land forces gathered at Tilbury to defend against the expected Spanish invasion. It was the highest expression of her trust in him. And it was at Tilbury that she gave the most famous speech of her reign, a moment that has defined her legend. She arrived on a white horse, wearing a silver breastplate over her white velvet gown, a general's baton in her hand, and Leicester was at her side. The scene at Tilbury in August of 1588 is one of the most iconic in English history. It's a moment so cinematic, it feels like it must be a later invention, but it was real. Imagine the atmosphere. A raw, damp, windy day on the Essex coast. Thousands of soldiers, a hastily assembled citizen army, are camped in the fields. They are nervous. They are farmers and shopkeepers, not professional soldiers. They are facing the most powerful military machine in the world, the Spanish Armada, a vast fleet that is, at that very moment, making its way up the English Channel. The fate of the nation hangs in the balance. There is a palpable sense of fear and uncertainty. Into this scene of muddy anxiety rides the Queen. She is 54 years old. She is not a young warrior princess, but a middle-aged woman who has been on the throne for 30 years. But on this day, she is transformed. Her silver cuirass gleams in the flat, gray light. She is a vision of defiance, and at her side, holding the bridle of her horse, is Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester. He is the commander, but on this day, he is also her squire, her champion. He watches her with a look of fierce pride. This is the culmination of their life together. Everything they have endured, every sacrifice they have made, has led to this moment. She is about to address her troops, and as she prepares to speak, she is not just a queen. She is the embodiment of their collective will to survive. And she delivers a speech that will ring down through the centuries. "My loving people," she begins, her voice carrying across the field, "I am come amongst you, as you see, at this time, not for my recreation and disport, but being resolved, in the midst of all the heat and battle, to live and die amongst you all." And then comes the most famous passage, the words that define her rule and her identity. "I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and of a king of England too, and think foul scorn that Parma or Spain or any prince of Europe should dare to invade the borders of my realm." It is a stunning declaration. She is acknowledging her physical vulnerability, the weak and feeble female body that her detractors had always used against her, but she is redefining it. She is saying that her true strength lies not in her body, but in her spirit, her heart and stomach of a king. She is transcending gender. She is embodying the nation itself. And as she speaks these words, Robert Dudley is there, witnessing the ultimate expression of the persona she has spent a lifetime creating. The persona that, in many ways, he helped to build, and which cost them both the chance of a normal life together. It is their greatest triumph. A few days later, the immediate threat of the Armada was over, scattered by the English Navy and a Protestant wind. The country erupted in celebration. It was the zenith of Elizabeth's reign, her finest hour. Leicester, his duty done, was exhausted and ill. He decided to leave the court for a time and travel to Buxton, a spa town, to take the waters for his recurring stomach ailments. He wrote a letter to the Queen, asking about her health and updating her on his own condition. It was a simple, affectionate note, the kind one loving partner might write to another. He signed it, as always, with his personal sign, a Greek letter delta inside a circle. He sent it off and continued his journey. He would never reach Buxton. His illness worsened, and a few days later, on September 4th, 1588, just weeks after the triumph at Tilbury, Robert Dudley died. He was 56 years old. The news was brought to the Queen at Richmond Palace. Accounts of her reaction are sparse, but they all agree on one thing: she was utterly devastated. She shut herself away in her chambers, refusing to see anyone. For days, she would not speak, would not eat. She was consumed by a grief so profound that her ministers, including the ever-pragmatic William Cecil, became genuinely alarmed for her health and the stability of the government. They worried she might simply waste away. Finally, they took the desperate measure of breaking down her door to reach her. They found a woman hollowed out by sorrow. The brilliant sun of the court had been extinguished. The Queen was in mourning, but it was her private actions that spoke most eloquently of her love for him. The last letter he had written to her, that simple note from his journey, arrived after his death. She took the letter and, in her neat, italic script, she wrote on the outside, his last letter. She placed it in a small casket, a treasure box, which she kept by her bedside. It remained there for the next 15 years, until her own death. It was a private, secret memorial to the man who had been the great love and the great sorrow of her life. The public icon, Gloriana, had to continue. The business of the kingdom could not stop for a broken heart. But the woman, Elizabeth Tudor, was forever changed. The brightest color had gone from her world. She would live on for another decade and a half, a lonely, aging monument. But the central relationship of her life was over. The story of Bess and Robin had come to its end. After Leicester's death, the court became a colder, more dangerous place for the aging queen. The steady, moderating influence of her old friend was gone. In his place, the rivalry between the sober, bureaucratic faction led by Robert Cecil, William Cecil's son, and the flamboyant, military faction led by the young Earl of Essex, Leicester's stepson, intensified. Elizabeth found herself caught between them, trying to manage the explosive ambition of Essex, who increasingly saw himself as Leicester's natural successor, not just in military command but in the Queen's affections. Her relationship with Essex soured dramatically in her final years. He was disobedient, entitled, and reckless. After a disastrous campaign in Ireland, he defied her orders and returned to London, storming into her private chambers at Nonsuch Palace early one morning before she was properly dressed or made up. It was a catastrophic error. He saw her not as the icon, Gloriana, but as she truly was, an old woman with thinning gray hair and a wrinkled face. He shattered the carefully maintained illusion. For this, and for his failures in Ireland, he was disgraced and banished from court. This humiliation, combined with his massive debts, pushed him over the edge. In 1601, he launched a desperate, ill-conceived rebellion, attempting to march on the palace and force the Queen to dismiss his rivals. The coup failed within hours. Essex was captured, tried for treason, and condemned to death. The Queen was faced with a terrible decision. She had loved him, in her way. He was the son of her great love's wife. But he had committed the ultimate crime. He had betrayed her. After agonizing, she signed his death warrant. Robert Devereux, Earl of Essex, was beheaded in the privacy of the Tower of London. It was a grim, sad end to the last of her great favorites. The execution of Essex seemed to cast a final shadow over her reign. She became more withdrawn, more melancholic. The vibrant, energetic court of her youth was now a distant memory. She was surrounded by the ghosts of the past. Her ladies-in-waiting reported that she would sit for hours in silence, or speak of strange premonitions. She was haunted by a sense of her own mortality. In March of 1603, she fell ill. She refused to go to bed, convinced that if she lay down, she would never get up again. For days, she sat propped on cushions on the floor, refusing food, refusing medicine. Her counselors gathered, waiting. Her godson, Sir Robert Carey, described her in those final days as holding a finger in her mouth, her eyes fixed and unresponsive. The end was near. They pressed her to name a successor. For decades, this had been the forbidden question, the one thing she would never discuss. To name an heir was to make herself obsolete, to create a new son for the courtiers to turn towards. But now, there was no more time for games. She had to secure the future of the kingdom she had devoted her life to. She could no longer speak, but when they mentioned the name of the Protestant King of Scotland, James VI, the son of her old rival and cousin, Mary, Queen of Scots, she was said to have made a sign of assent. On the 24th of March, 1603, in the early hours of the morning, Elizabeth I died. She was 69 years old and had ruled England for 44 years. Her death marked the end of the Tudor dynasty and the end of an era. And so we come back to our original question, the quiet whisper that has followed her through history. Was she, in the end, the Virgin Queen? Physically, we will never know for certain. The evidence is purely circumstantial. There are the frantic, scandalized reports of the Spanish ambassador in the early years. There is the undeniable, lifelong, passionate attachment to Robert Dudley. There is the Queen's own furious, jealous reaction to his marriage. All of this smoke suggests a fire. It seems hard to believe, as her contemporaries did, that two people so in love, with so much opportunity, would have abstained for their entire lives. But then there is the evidence on the other side. Elizabeth was a woman of incredible self-control and political genius. She knew, better than anyone, that a pregnancy, a secret child, would be the one secret she could not keep, the one scandal that would utterly destroy her. It would be a catastrophic risk to everything she had built. Was her love for her crown, for her kingdom, stronger than her love for any man? That is entirely possible. In fact, it's probable. Perhaps they did have a physical relationship in the heady, reckless first year of her reign, before the death of Amy Robsart changed the stakes. And perhaps after that, they made the painful, pragmatic decision to stop, to transform their physical passion into a different kind of bond. A political partnership, a deep friendship, a spiritual marriage. This is, perhaps, the most likely scenario. But in a way, the question of her physical virginity is a red herring. It's the wrong question, because Elizabeth's virginity was not, ultimately, a biological fact. It was a political and cultural statement. She ruled as a virgin. She created a persona, a myth, of a queen who was married to her kingdom, a mother to her people, a semi-divine figure who had transcended the ordinary needs of the flesh for a higher calling. And that myth was one of the most successful pieces of political branding in history. It gave her power. It gave her agency. It allowed her to rule in a man's world on her own terms. She took what should have been her greatest weakness, her gender, and turned it into her ultimate strength. She used the endless speculation about her body, her marriage, to keep the great powers of Europe off balance for decades. She reigned, in the end, not in spite of being a woman, but because of how she chose to perform her womanhood. The real love story of Elizabeth I is not about whether she and Robert Dudley ever slept together. The real love story is about her and England. That was the marriage she chose. That was the passion she consummated every day of her reign. And the children she left behind were not of her body, but of her rule. A stable, prosperous, and self-confident nation, ready to face a new century. She left a legacy of art, literature, and exploration, the age of Shakespeare, of Drake, of Spencer, and she left us with a mystery. A quiet, intimate question about the heart of a queen, a question that we can ponder in the stillness of the night as we drift away into the soft, silent country of sleep. Let's stay a little longer in this quiet, reflective space, letting the story settle. Picture Elizabeth's face, not the iconic mask from the portraits, but the real face, the one Robert Dudley knew. A face capable of sharp intelligence, of hearty laughter, of devastating fury, and of profound, secret sorrow. Her life was a study in contradictions. She was a woman of immense personal charm, who spent most of her life profoundly alone. She was a ruler who craved love and affection, but understood that for her, love was a political liability. She was the head of the Protestant Church who kept a crucifix and candles in her private chapel, a nod to the old Catholic traditions she had grown up with. She was a monarch who projected an image of unshakable strength and certainty, but who was, by her own admission, often consumed by indecision, famously telling her counselors that she would pray to God to be delivered from the perils of a long deliberation. She was, in other words, deeply human. And perhaps the most human thing about her was her long, complicated, and unresolved relationship with Robert Dudley. It was the emotional anchor of her life. Let's drift back to their youth, to that shared time in the Tower. Imagine the cold stone, the damp chill that never leaves, the constant fear. Elizabeth is in her early 20s. Robert is the same age. He is in the Beauchamp Tower. She is in the royal apartments, a more comfortable but no less frightening prison. They can't see each other, but they know the other is there. Perhaps a friendly guard, a yeoman warder loyal to the Protestant cause, carries a message between them. A scrawled note, a whispered word of encouragement. Be strong. Pray for me. These small acts of connection in the face of death would forge a bond of incredible strength. When they were both free again, they were the only two people in the world who truly understood what the other had endured. This shared history gave their relationship a weight and a depth that none of her later favorites could ever match. Hatton and Essex adored the Queen, the glorious public figure. But Robert Dudley loved Bess, the girl who had survived the Tower, and she loved him for it. This is why she could never truly let him go. He was a living reminder of her own survival. He was her history. When he was near, She was not just the queen, she was her whole self, a woman with a past, with scars, with memories. This is a profound comfort that is hard to give up. We can also feel a deep sense of melancholy for what might have been. Imagine a different world, a parallel timeline. In this world, Amy Robsart does not fall down the stairs. Perhaps she lives for several more years and eventually succumbs to her illness. Her death, coming after a long and documented sickness, would have been sad, but not scandalous. In this timeline, Elizabeth, after a suitable period of mourning, might have felt free to marry Robert. What would that have looked like? A King Robert and a Queen Elizabeth. It would have caused immense political problems. The other noble families, the Howards and the Cecils, would have been deeply jealous of the Dudley ascendancy. There would have been plots and factions. But perhaps they could have weathered it. Perhaps together they could have had children. A Tudor heir, a Prince Henry or a Princess Mary. The course of English history would have been entirely different. There would have been no need for a Scottish king to inherit, no Stuart dynasty. The civil wars of the next century might never have happened. It's a fascinating what if. But in that world, would Elizabeth have been the same ruler? Would she have become the icon, Gloriana? Or would she have been subsumed by the role of wife and mother, her power secondary to that of her husband? By choosing to remain unmarried, by sacrificing her personal happiness with Robert, she secured her own absolute authority. It was a brutal trade-off. Her body for a kingdom, her love for a crown. We see this trade-off reflected in the art of her reign. The early portraits show a young woman who looks directly at the viewer. She is confident, but she is human. Her expression is knowable. As the years go on, and the persona of the Virgin Queen solidifies, the portraits become more abstract. Her body disappears inside vast, symbolic dresses. Her face becomes a pale, unchanging mask. The jewels and emblems she wears are not just decoration, they are a language. A pelican pecking its own breast to feed its young is a symbol of her self-sacrifice for her people. A sieve is a symbol of her chastity, referring to a Roman Vestal Virgin who proved her purity by carrying water in a sieve. An ermine, a creature that would supposedly rather die than soil its white fur, is another symbol of her purity. She became a walking collection of symbols, a text to be read, rather than a person to be known. And Robert Dudley had to watch this transformation. He had to watch the woman he loved slowly disappear into the icon she was creating. He gained immense wealth and power from his closeness to her, but he lost the woman he had first known. There's a quiet tragedy in that. Let's think for a moment about the other women in this story. They are often footnotes, but their lives were profoundly shaped by the Queen's choices. There is Amy Robsart, the forgotten wife. Her life has been reduced to a single, mysterious event, her death. But she was a real person. She loved, she managed a household, she felt pain and loneliness. Her lonely death, whether by accident, suicide, or murder, is a dark stain on the glittering tapestry of the Elizabethan court. It's a reminder of the human cost of the games of power. Then there is Lettice Knollys, the she-wolf. She is often cast as the villain of the story, the woman who stole the Queen's love. But from her perspective, she was a widow who fell in love with a man who was, for all intents and purposes, single. She married him, bore him a son, and for this, she was punished with a lifetime of royal disfavor. She was banished from the center of power, forced to live in the shadows, simply because the Queen could not bear her existence. Lettice outlived them all. She lived to be 93 years old, a grand old dame of the Elizabethan and Jacobean eras, a living link to that lost world. She never regained the Queen's favor, but she kept her husband's love and her own dignity. Her story is a testament to female resilience in a world dominated by the whims of a powerful queen. And then there are the legions of ladies-in-waiting. Women like Blanche Parry, who was Elizabeth's governess and chief gentlewoman of the Privy Chamber for most of her life. These women were her constant companions. They dressed her, bathed her, read to her, and guarded the entrance to her private world. They knew her secrets. They knew her moods. They saw her without her wig and makeup. They knew the truth of her physical state. If she had been pregnant, they would have known. Their silence and loyalty were essential to to the maintenance of the Virgin Queen myth. They were the silent architects of her public image. Their lives were lives of service, of quiet observation. They sacrificed their own marriages and families to serve their queen. They were the nuns in the secular convent of the court, their lives dedicated to the worship of Gloriana. Their perspective is one we can only imagine. The quiet rustle of silk in the privy chamber, the low murmur of the queen's voice late at night, the tension in the air when a letter from a suitor arrived, the shared, secret relief when the Anjou match fell through. They were the audience, the stagehands, and the guardians of the greatest theatrical performance of the age. Their story is written in invisible ink between the lines of the official histories. By focusing on these other women, we get a richer, more complete picture of Elizabeth's world. We see that her choice not to marry had ripple effects that touched everyone around her. It created a court culture that was unique in European history. A court that revolved not around a king and his queen, but around a solitary female son, with dozens of male courtiers orbiting her like planets, all vying for the warmth of her favor. It was a world of intense competition, of poetry, of courtly love revived as a political tool. A man could win favor by writing a sonnet praising the queen's beauty, or by fighting brilliantly in a tournament held in her honor. It was a strange, beautiful, and dangerous world, and it was all a product of Elizabeth's central, life-defining decision. A decision that was born in the trauma of her youth and hardened into a political philosophy. A decision that was always in the background, colored by the sad, impossible love of her sweet Robin. As the night deepens, let's allow our thoughts to drift, to move away from the grand stage of politics and into the quiet, sensory details of their world. Imagine the feel of the clothes, not the soft, comfortable fabrics we are used to, but heavy, stiff, structured garments. A velvet doublet, a silk gown stiff with embroidery and sewn-in jewels. The clothes were a form of armor, both literally and figuratively. They projected status, wealth, and power. They also restricted movement. To wear the clothes of the court was to be constantly aware of your own performance. Imagine the taste of the food. For the rich, it was a riot of spices. Ginger, cloves, saffron, pepper. These were fantastically expensive, a way to show off wealth. Meats were roasted with sweet sauces made from fruit and wine. Sugar was used lavishly, in elaborate sculptures and in savory dishes. It was a cuisine of strong, unsubtle flavors, and it was a disaster for dental health. The queen herself was famous for her black teeth, a result of her love for sugar. Imagine the sounds. In the absence of our modern mechanical hum, the world was both quieter and louder. The silence of the countryside at night would have been absolute, a deep, velvety blackness of sound. But in the city, or in the palace, the sounds were human and animal. The clatter of horses' hooves on cobblestones, the cry of a street vendor, the barking of dogs, the tolling of church bells, which marked the hours of the day. And inside the palace, the constant murmur of voices, the shuffling of feet, the crackle of the fire, and, in the evenings, the sweet, melancholy sound of a lute or a virginal being played in a quiet corner. This was the sensory world that Elizabeth and Robert inhabited. It was a world of sharp contrasts, immense luxury and profound discomfort, exquisite beauty and underlying filth, public ceremony and secret intimacy. By immersing ourselves in these details, we can get a little closer to their reality. We can begin to understand the context for their choices. When we think about their relationship, it's easy to project our modern ideas of love and romance onto them. But their love existed in this very different world. A world where marriage was a business transaction, where life was precarious, and where privacy was a rare and precious commodity. Their love had to be strong to survive in that environment, and it did survive. It survived scandal, separation, his marriage, her flirtations with other men. It survived for 30 years, right up until his death. What was the secret of its endurance? Perhaps it was that it was never allowed to become ordinary. It was never normalized into the daily routine of a marriage. It remained something special, something set apart. A constant courtship. A flame kept alive in a secret garden. They were never just husband and wife. They were always Elizabeth and her Robin, the queen and her favorite. Their relationship was a performance, just like her queenship. And perhaps, for two people who lived their entire lives on a public stage, that was the only kind of love that could truly last. This brings us to a final, gentle reflection on the nature of history itself. We look back at these figures, these grand names from the past, and we try to understand them. We read the documents, the letters, the ambassadors' reports. We analyze their decisions. We try to answer questions like, was the Virgin Queen really a virgin? But we can only ever see them through a glass, darkly. We can never know the quiet conversations, the secret thoughts, the true feelings in their hearts. The past is a foreign country, and we are just tourists, peering at the monuments. But sometimes, if we are quiet and patient, we can catch a glimpse of the real people behind the legends. We can feel a pang of sympathy for Amy Robsart's loneliness. We can understand Elizabeth's fury at Lettice Knolles's marriage. We can feel the depth of her grief when she wrote his last letter on that folded piece of paper. In these small, human moments, the past comes alive, and we realize that these people, for all their strange clothes and grand titles, were not so different from us. They loved, they feared, they hoped, they grieved. They made mistakes. They had regrets. And their stories, whispered to us across the centuries, can be a source of comfort, of perspective, of quiet companionship in the dark of the night. The story of Elizabeth and Robert is, in the end, a story about the choices we make and the prices we pay for them. It's a story about a great love that was also a great sacrifice. And it's a story that doesn't need a neat and tidy answer to be true. The mystery is part of its beauty. The unanswered question is what keeps it alive. A gentle hum in the quiet halls of history. A perfect story to drift away to. Let's linger for a moment on that final image. Elizabeth, in the years after Robert's death, alone in her chamber with the small box containing his last letter. The court is asleep, the fires are burning low, the palace is silent, and the aging queen, the great icon of her age, is alone with her memories. What does she think about in these quiet hours? Does she regret her choices? Does she wonder about the life she might have had, the children she never bore? Or is she at peace, content with the knowledge that she built something that will last, something greater than her own personal happiness? Perhaps it's a mixture of both, a quiet pride in her achievement, tinged with a deep, personal melancholy. This is the duality that defines her, the public triumph and the private cost. We can imagine her tracing the faded ink of Robert's signature, a signature she had seen thousands of times, on state papers, on personal notes, on love poems. It was as familiar to her as her own hand. In that signature, she could read the whole story of their lives together. The hopeful young man, the ambitious courtier, the powerful earl, the aging companion. He is gone now, but in this small piece of paper, he is still present. This small ritual, keeping his last letter by her bed, is one of the most intimate details we know about her. It cuts through the layers of propaganda, the portraits, the poems. It reveals the vulnerable, loving heart beneath the stiff ruff and the jeweled gown. It tells us that for all her power, for all her fame, she was a woman who had loved one man her entire life and had lost him. This simple human truth is more powerful than any political treaty or military victory. It's the kind of detail that makes history feel close, feel real. And it reminds us that even the greatest figures are shaped by the universal experiences of love and loss. As we think about Elizabeth's long reign, it's easy to focus on the grand events. The Spanish Armada, the execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, the flourishing of Shakespearean theater. But the real texture of her life was made up of smaller, quieter moments. The daily grind of governing, the endless meetings with her council, the careful reading of intelligence reports, the drafting of letters to other monarchs. It was a life of immense work and responsibility. And through it all, Robert Dudley was the one person she could truly relax with. He was the one who could make her laugh when she was weighed down by the cares of state. He could tease her, challenge her, speak to her as an equal in a way that no one else dared. He was her escape from the crushing loneliness of supreme power. That is why his loss was so devastating. He was not just her love. He was her partner in the long, exhausting business of being queen. His death was not just a personal bereavement. It was the loss of a vital part of her own political and emotional machinery. After he was gone, she had to rule truly alone. The final 15 years of her reign are often seen as a period of decline. The Tudor sunset. The court was beset by factionalism. The country was weary of war with Spain, and the Queen herself seemed to have lost some of her old fire. The execution of Essex was a symptom of this decline, a sign that she had lost her deft touch in managing the egos of the men around her. But even in her decline, she was magnificent. She never lost her sense of theater, her ability to command a room. She continued to project an image of timeless authority, even as her body failed her. She played the part of Gloriana right up to the very end. But we, in the quiet of the night, can look past the performance. We can see the tired old woman underneath the makeup and the wig. We can feel the weight of her 69 years, the burden of her 44-year reign, and we can appreciate the immense strength it took to carry that burden for so long, especially after her one true partner was gone. The story of Elizabeth and Robert Dudley is ultimately a ghost story. It's haunted by the ghost of Amy Robsart, the woman whose convenient death made their marriage impossible. It's haunted by the ghosts of the children they never had, the dynasty that never was. And in the end, it's the story of Elizabeth being haunted by the ghost of Robert himself, a memory she kept alive in a small box by her bed. These are the quiet, sad, and beautiful truths that lie beneath the surface of the history books. They are the human stories that give the grand narrative its meaning and its power. And as you let these thoughts drift and settle, you can feel the centuries melt away. The world of Tudor England, with its dangers and its passions, feels a little closer, a little more understandable. And the figures of Elizabeth and Robert feel less like historical statues and more like people we might have known. People who made a choice, a hard choice, and lived with the consequences for the rest of their lives. A queen who gained a kingdom and lost a husband. A man who gained a queen's love, but never her hand. A story of what was and what might have been. A perfect, gentle mystery to accompany you into sleep. As we continue to drift on these quiet currents of thought, let's consider the very concept of a secret in the Tudor court. It's a concept that is very different from our modern understanding. In our world, a secret can be truly private, locked away in our digital devices or in the privacy of our own homes. But in the close, communal world of a Tudor palace, true privacy was almost non-existent. The Queen was never truly alone. From the moment she woke to the moment she slept, she was surrounded by her ladies. They dressed her, they did her hair, they were present for her meals. Her physicians would examine her bodily fluids. Her every move was observed, noted, and discussed. The court was a village, and a very gossipy one at that. So, when we talk about Elizabeth and Dudley's secret affair, we are not talking about something no one knew. We are talking about something that was not officially acknowledged. It was an open secret. Everyone knew or suspected. The ambassadors wrote about it. The courtiers whispered about it. But as long as the Queen did not officially admit it, as long as there was no public proof, like a marriage certificate or a baby, then the fiction of the Virgin Queen could be maintained. It was a game of plausible deniability. This is a key to understanding her world. It was a world of performance, where image was everything. What you were in public was more important than what you were in private. The Queen's body politic was more important than her body natural. So, a physical relationship with Robert Dudley would have been a catastrophic risk, not just because it was morally questionable, but because it threatened to make the private reality public. A pregnancy would have shattered the performance. It would have made the lie undeniable. And that is why it is most likely that, whatever happened between them, they were incredibly careful. Or, after a certain point, they simply stopped. The risk was too great. The performance was too important. This puts their love in a new light. It was a love that had to be disciplined, controlled, and sublimated into other forms. Into companionship, into political partnership, into a shared, secret understanding. It became a love that was expressed not in embraces, but in a shared glance across a crowded room. Not in kisses, but in the private joke whispered in a corner. This makes their bond, in some ways, even more romantic and more poignant. It was a love that had to invent its own language, its own rules. It existed in the spaces between the official lines. It was a masterpiece of improvisation, sustained over decades, and it required a level of trust between them that is almost breathtaking. Elizabeth had to trust Robert not to expose her, not to boast of her favor, not to use their intimacy to his own advantage in a way that would damage her. And he, in turn, had to trust that her affection for him was real, even when she was publicly entertaining other suitors and declaring her intention to live and die a virgin. He had to accept his role as the permanent, unofficial consort, the prince in the shadows. He had to live with the constant frustration of being so close to the sun, but never being able to truly touch it. It was a relationship that demanded immense patience and emotional intelligence from both of them. And the fact that it lasted for so long is a testament to the profound connection they shared. It was more than just passion. It was a deep, symbiotic partnership. They were two halves of a whole, governing a kingdom together, one in public, one in private. She was the head, and he was the heart. Or perhaps she was the sun, and he was the earth that orbited her, drawing life and warmth from her light, but always keeping a respectful distance. This celestial analogy was one the Elizabethans themselves would have appreciated. They lived in a world where the movements of the planets were thought to influence human destiny. They saw the world in terms of symbols and correspondences, and the relationship between their virgin queen and her favorite lord was a perfect subject for this kind of symbolic thinking. They were the central myth of their own court, a living legend that everyone could watch and interpret. And we, 400 years later, are still doing the same thing, still trying to interpret the symbols, still trying to read the story written in their glances and their gestures, still puzzling over the great central mystery of their love. And the beauty of it is that the mystery remains. It has not been solved by time. It remains a quiet, shimmering space for our own imaginations to wander in, a story that is all the more powerful for what it leaves unsaid. Let's turn our attention back to Robert Dudley for a moment, not as the Queen's lover, but as a man in his own right. He is often portrayed as a handsome, ambitious, and slightly villainous figure, the schemer who may have murdered his wife. But this is a caricature. He was a man of great complexity and talent. He was a skilled soldier and a capable administrator. He was a patron of the arts and of exploration. He funded voyages of discovery and supported a company of actors, Leicester's Men, which was a forerunner of Shakespeare's own company. He was a passionate advocate for a more aggressive, international Protestant foreign policy, often clashing with the more cautious William Cecil. He was a man of the Renaissance, with a wide range of interests and a deep commitment to the Protestant cause. His relationship with the Queen was the central fact of his life, but it was not his whole life, and it was often a source of immense frustration for him. He was a man of great ambition and ability, but he could never achieve the ultimate power he craved because he was tied to the Queen's orbit. He could never be king. He could never act independently without her permission. He was, in many ways, a prisoner of her affection. His secret marriage to Lettice Knollys can be seen in this light. It was an act of rebellion, a declaration of independence. It was his attempt to have a normal life, a wife and a family, away from the hothouse atmosphere of the court and the impossible demands of his relationship with the Queen. It was him trying to be his own man. Of course, it failed. The Queen's reaction was so volcanic that it pulled him right back into her orbit. He learned that he could never truly be free of her. Their lives were inextricably intertwined. But the attempt shows us a man struggling with his own destiny, not just a passive favorite. He was an active agent in his own life, making choices, taking risks, and dealing with the consequences. This makes him a more interesting and sympathetic character. He was not just a handsome face. He was a man of substance, caught in an impossible situation. We can also feel a certain sympathy for him as he aged. He had to watch younger, more dashing men like Essex capture the Queen's attention. He had to endure the infirmities of age, his old diseases as he called them, while the Queen, through the artifice of her court, remained eternally youthful in her public image. He had to watch the world he had helped to build change around him. His letters from his final years have a tone of weariness, of a man who has fought many battles and is ready for a rest. His death, in this context, feels less like a tragedy and more like a gentle release. He had played his part. He had loved and served his queen for 30 years. He had done his duty at Tilbury. And then, his work was done. It was time to go. And for Elizabeth, his death marked the end of her own story in a way. The part of her that was Bess died with him. The part that could laugh and tease and be vulnerable. All that was left was Gloriana, the public monument. And for the next 15 years, she had to inhabit that monument alone. It is a profoundly melancholic image, the survivor, left to wander the empty halls of her own legend. When we think of the story in this way, it becomes less of a whodunit about Amy Robsart, or a did they or didn't they about their physical relationship. It becomes a deeper, more resonant story about time, aging, and loss. It's a story about the enduring power of a shared history and the profound emptiness that comes when the person who shares that history is gone. It's a universal human experience, played out on the grandest of stages. And it's this universal human quality that makes their story so timeless, so comforting in its own sad, beautiful way. It connects us to them, across the vast gulf of time, and reminds us of the common threads of love and sorrow that bind us all together. Let us drift back to the idea of the Queen's two bodies, a concept the Elizabethans took very seriously. The body natural was her physical, mortal, female body. It was subject to sickness, aging, and death. It was seen as weak, emotional, and unreliable, all the stereotypes associated with womanhood at the time. The body politic was her immortal, symbolic, masculine body. This was the body of the state, the crown, the office of the monarch. It was eternal, infallible, and divine. The great challenge of Elizabeth's reign was to manage the relationship between these two bodies. Her genius was in finding a way to make her weak body natural serve and strengthen her powerful body politic. The creation of the Virgin Queen myth was the key to this. By declaring her virginity, she symbolically purified her female body. She elevated it above the normal, messy business of sex, childbirth, and marriage. She made her physical body a sacred object, a symbol of the nation's integrity. Her virginity was not a lack, but a presence. It was a sign of her special, divine status. She was not an ordinary woman. She was a queen set apart. This is why the question of her physical, private actions was so dangerous. If her body natural was found to be corrupt, if she was secretly sexually active, it would undermine the purity of her body politic. It would reveal the icon to be a fraud. The whole carefully constructed edifice of her authority could come crashing down. This is an immense pressure for one person to live under. Every personal desire, every human impulse, had to be weighed against its potential political consequences. Imagine living a life where a single, private mistake could lead to the collapse of your government. It's a recipe for extreme self-control, for a life of constant vigilance, and it helps to explain her famous indecisiveness. She would prevaricate for months, even years, over important decisions like the execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, or the marriage to the Duke of Anjou. Her counselors would tear their hair out in frustration, but from her perspective, this caution was a survival mechanism. She was playing for the highest stakes. A wrong move was not just a political error, it was a potential existential threat to her rule. And at the center of all this pressure was her relationship with Robert Dudley. He was the greatest joy of her body natural and the greatest threat to her body politic. He was her love and her greatest political problem. This contradiction is the engine of her life story. For 30 years, she walked this tightrope. She had to find a way to keep him in her life without allowing their relationship to destroy her public image. It was an incredibly difficult balancing act, and for the most part, she succeeded. She kept his love, and she kept her crown, but it came at a cost. The cost was transparency, honesty, and the freedom to love openly. They had to live a life of secrets, of coded language, of public performance. It was a love that could never be fully spoken. It had to exist in the shadows, in the margins. This is what makes it so fascinating. It's a story about the tension between the personal and the political, between the heart's desires and the demands of duty. And it's a story that unfolds over a lifetime, a slow, patient drama of love, loss, and survival. As you settle deeper into relaxation, you can let these complex ideas wash over you gently. You don't need to grasp all the details, just feel the weight of it, the weight of the crown, the weight of a secret love, the weight of a life lived on the public stage. It's a heavy burden. And as we contemplate it, we can feel a sense of release, a sense of our own burdens becoming lighter. Our own lives, with their smaller stakes and simpler choices, feel a little easier, a little more peaceful. And that is the gift of history. It gives us perspective. It takes us out of ourselves and connects us to a larger, longer story. And in that connection, there is a deep and quiet comfort. Let's imagine one final scene. It's late in Elizabeth's reign, perhaps a few years before she dies. Leicester is gone. Essex is gone. Most of her old friends are gone. She is in her privy chamber at Whitehall, late at night. The fire is casting long, dancing shadows on the tapestries. Her ladies are asleep in the antechamber. For a few precious moments, she is truly alone. She is sitting in a large, carved chair, a heavy book open on her lap, but she is not reading. Her gaze is distant. The moonlight streams through the tall, mullioned window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The room is filled with the ghosts of her long life. She can almost see them. Her mother, Anne Boleyn, a beautiful, tragic phantom with a dark slash across her neck. Her sister, Mary, a sad, stern figure, clutching her phantom child. Her brother, Edward, a pale, intelligent boy who died too soon. And then, there he is, Robert, not the aging, weary Earl of Leicester, but the young, laughing Robin of her youth. He is leaning against the mantelpiece, his dark eyes sparkling with mischief. He is teasing her about her serious expression. He is telling her a story from the stables. He is reaching out his hand to her, and she smiles. A real, tired, deeply sad smile. The memory is so vivid, it's almost real. For a moment, he is there, and then he fades, and she is alone again in the silent room. This is the landscape of old age, a world populated by memories, by the ghosts of those we have loved and lost. And for Elizabeth, who had lived so long and lost so much, the ghosts must have been numerous. Her life was a procession of farewells, and yet she endured. She got up the next morning, allowed her ladies to lace her into her gown, to paint her face, to place the red wig on her head. She put on the armor of Gloriana and went out to face another day, to rule, to be the queen. This strength, this resilience in the face of such profound personal loss is perhaps her most remarkable quality. It was a strength forged in the fire of her traumatic childhood. She had learned early that to survive, she must rely on herself alone. She could trust no one completely. Not her father, who had killed her mother. Not her sister, who had imprisoned her. Not her brother's counselors, who saw her as a pawn. She had learned to be an island, and Robert Dudley was the only person who was ever allowed to build a bridge to that island. When he died, the bridge was destroyed, and she was isolated once more. But she knew how to survive on the island. She had been doing it her whole life. As we contemplate this image of the solitary, aging queen, we can feel a sense of deep empathy for her. The great historical figure becomes a lonely old woman, sitting in the dark with her memories. And in that moment of connection, the centuries between us dissolve. We understand her not as a monarch, but as a human being. And this is the ultimate goal of our journey tonight. To move beyond the dates and the battles, beyond the political maneuvering and the public persona, and to find the human heart of the story. To understand Elizabeth Tudor not just as the Virgin Queen, but as a woman who lived a life of extraordinary triumph and profound sorrow. A woman who loved deeply, lost greatly, and endured. Her story is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. And as we drift off to sleep, we can carry that sense of resilience with us. The knowledge that even in the face of loss and loneliness, there is a strength within us that can carry on. the world keeps turning. The sun comes up, and we put on our armor, whatever it may be, and face the day, just as she did, for 44 long, glorious, and lonely years. As our journey comes to a soft landing, let's gather the threads of this story one last time. We began with a simple, almost tabloid question. Was she or wasn't she? But we have discovered that the answer is not simple at all. In fact, the question itself is perhaps not the most interesting one to ask. The story is not in the answer, but in the complexity of the question itself. It's in the why. Why did she choose this path? Why did the persona of the Virgin Queen become so powerful? Why was her relationship with Robert Dudley so enduring and so fraught with difficulty? The answer to these whys lies in a tapestry woven from many threads. The thread of her personal psychology, shaped by childhood trauma and a fierce intelligence. The thread of political necessity, the need to secure her throne in a world that believed a woman could not rule alone. The thread of religious conflict, the deep divisions between Protestant and Catholic that threatened to tear her kingdom apart. And the bright, crimson thread of her love for Robert Dudley, a love that ran through the entire fabric of her life, giving it both its most vibrant color and its greatest point of stress. This tapestry is the true story. It's a story that resists easy conclusions. History is not a set of facts to be memorized, but a series of stories to be interpreted. And the story of Elizabeth I is one of the richest and most endlessly interpretable stories we have. We can see her as a feminist icon, a woman who defied the patriarchal conventions of her time to rule in her own right. We can see her as a master politician, a brilliant strategist who played the game of nations with consummate skill. We can see her as a tragic romantic figure, a woman who sacrificed her own happiness for the good of her country. She was all of these things, and more. She was a bundle of contradictions, a complex and fascinating human being who left an indelible mark on the world. And her story is a reminder that the past is not a dead and dusty thing. It is alive with passion, with intrigue, with love, and with loss. It is a source of endless fascination, a well of stories that can nourish our imaginations and soothe our minds. And so, as you lie here, on the edge of sleep, you can let the figure of the Virgin Queen go, let the icon dissolve, and in her place, see the woman, Elizabeth Tudor, a young girl, frightened but determined, in the Tower of London, a young queen, giddy with love and power, tickling her favorite's neck, a middle-aged ruler, weeping with frustration over the impossible choice of marriage, an old woman sitting alone in the moonlight, her heart filled with ghosts. She is not a monument. She is a companion for the night, a quiet voice from a distant century, whispering a story of a life lived to the fullest, a story of love and power, of sacrifice and survival, a story that is now a part of your own quiet drift into dreams. There are no more questions to answer, no more mysteries to solve. There is only the gentle, rhythmic tide of history, pulling you out into a calm and peaceful sea of sleep. Good night. As the last echoes of the story fade, we can settle into a place of deep quiet. The great stage of the Tudor court is now empty. The actors have taken their bows and departed into the shadows of time. The torches have been extinguished, the tapestries taken down. All that remains is a profound and peaceful silence. In this silence, we can appreciate the scale of what we've witnessed. A human life lived over 7 decades, filled with more drama and consequence than a dozen ordinary lives. It's a reminder of the immense capacity of a single individual to shape the course of history. Elizabeth was not merely a product of her time. She was an architect of it. Her decisions, her personality, her very existence altered the path of her nation and, by extension, the world. But now, the great work is done. The burden of the crown has been laid down. The performance is over, and what is left is a sense of completion, of a story told. We can feel a sense of gratitude for having been able to visit this world, to walk its corridors, to feel its textures, to listen to its secrets. It's a world that is gone forever, but it lives on in our collective memory, in the stories we tell. And these stories have a power. They connect us to the long chain of human experience. They remind us that our own struggles, our own joys, our own loves and losses are part of a much larger pattern. We are not the first to feel these things, and we will not be the last. There is a deep comfort in this continuity. It places our own lives in a broader perspective, making our immediate worries seem a little smaller, a little less overwhelming. The problems of a Tudor queen, a Spanish invasion, a contested succession, a scandalous love affair, are so grand, so historic, that they make our own challenges feel more manageable. This is one of the quiet gifts of spending time with history. It doesn't solve our problems, but it can help to resize them. It can offer us a sense of scale, a long view, and as you drift further and further away, you can let that long view expand. See the centuries rolling by, the Tudor age giving way to the Stuart, the Georgian, the Victorian. See the world changing, technology advancing, empires rising and falling. And through it all, the fundamental human experiences remain the same: love, ambition, fear, hope. The story of Elizabeth and Robert is just one chapter in this vast, ongoing human story. A particularly beautiful and poignant chapter, but a chapter nonetheless. And now, it is time to close the book, to let the characters rest, to let the silence deepen. There is nothing more to do, nothing more to think about. There is only the soft, gentle rhythm of your own breathing, in and out, a quiet, steady tide. Let each breath carry you a little further from the shore of wakefulness, out into the deep, calm ocean of sleep. The story is over. Your night is just beginning. A night of peace, of rest, of deep and dreamless slumber. The ghosts of the past are quiet now. The Queen is at peace, and so are you. Let's allow the mind to become like a great, still lake at midnight. The surface is smooth as glass, reflecting the stars. The stories we have heard are like stones dropped into this lake. The ripples spread out, wider and wider, and then they fade, leaving the surface calm and undisturbed once more. The details of the story, the names, the dates, the events, can now recede. What remains is not the information, but the feeling of melancholy, of romance, of strength, of sacrifice. These feelings can linger, like a gentle fragrance in the air, without needing the structure of the narrative to support them. You can simply float in this emotional residue, a warm and comforting bath of human experience. Think of the color red, the red of Elizabeth's hair, a defiant banner of her Tudor heritage. The red of the roses of England, the deep crimson of a velvet cloak, the color of passion, of power, of danger, and of love. Let this color fill your mind's eye for a moment, and then let it soften, fading to a gentle pink, the color of a dawn sky, and then to a soft, peaceful white. Now, think of the texture of stone, the cold, damp stone of the Tower of London, the rough, weathered stone of a country manor, the smooth, polished stone of a palace floor. Feel the weight and the permanence of it. Stone endures. It holds the memories of all who have touched it. It is a silent witness to history. Feel the solidity and the calmness of stone, and let that feeling of groundedness, of stability, enter your own body. Feel yourself heavy, supported, and still. Now, listen for the sound of a lute, a single, clear, plucked note, hanging in the silence of a great hall. The melody is simple, slow, and a little sad. It is a sound that speaks of longing, of beauty, and of the passage of time. It is a sound that can hold both joy and sorrow in its gentle notes. Let this imaginary music be the soundtrack to your descent into sleep. It is a lullaby from another century, a thread of sound connecting you to that distant world. The music requires nothing of you. You don't have to analyze it or even listen to it closely. Just let it be there, in the background of your awareness, a soft and steady companion. The story has been told. The sensory impressions have been explored. The emotions have been felt. Now, the work is done. Your mind can be free. It can be empty. It can be still. If thoughts arise, as they will, you can simply observe them, like clouds passing in the sky. You don't need to follow them. You can let them drift by, returning your attention, ever so gently, to to the simple sensation of your breath, or to the imaginary sound of the lute, or to the feeling of the calm, still lake. There is no effort required. There is only letting go. Letting go of the day, letting go of your thoughts, letting go of the story, and allowing yourself to sink slowly, gently, and completely into the deep, restorative peace of sleep. The world of the waking mind is a world of lines and definitions, of questions and answers, of beginnings and endings. The world of sleep is a world without lines, a world of fluid, shifting landscapes, a world where questions and answers dissolve into pure experience. As you stand on the threshold between these two worlds, you can feel the rigid structures of thought begin to soften and melt away. The story of Elizabeth and Robert, with its clear narrative arc, its characters, its conflicts, begins to break apart, like a reflection in a disturbed pool of water. The images remain, but they are no longer connected by logic. A flash of a jewel on a pale hand, the scent of beeswax, the sound of a horse's hoof on stone, the feeling of cold velvet. These fragments drift freely in the vast, quiet space of your pre-sleep consciousness. There is no need to try and piece them back together. The story has served its purpose. It has been a boat to carry you across the choppy waters of the day's thoughts, bringing you to this calm and quiet shore. Now you can step out of the boat. You can leave it behind. You can walk onto the soft sand of a deeper state of rest. On this shore, there are no expectations. There is no need to understand or remember anything. There is only permission. Permission to rest. Permission to be still. Permission to let go of all effort. To allow your body to feel heavy and relaxed. To allow your mind to become quiet and spacious. Imagine your awareness as a single, soft point of light, floating in a vast, dark, and peaceful space. This space is infinite. It is safe. It is silent. There is nothing to do in this space, nothing to achieve. It is a space of pure being, and you can allow your point of light to simply float, to drift, to be held by the silent emptiness. If you are still holding on to any part of the story, any lingering thought or image, you can offer it up to this vast space. Watch it dissolve, like a snowflake melting into the ocean. Let go of Elizabeth. Let go of Robert. Let go of their love, their sorrow, their kingdom. Their story is over. It is held safely in the past. It does not need you to carry it any longer. You are free. Your only task now is to surrender to the pull of sleep. It is a gentle, gravitational force, drawing you down into the core of your own being. It is a homecoming, a return to the source of your own energy and peace. Trust this process. Your body knows how to sleep. Your mind knows how to be quiet. All you have to do is get out of the way. All you have to do is allow it to happen. And so, with a final, gentle breath, you let go completely. You release your hold on the shore of wakefulness, and you allow yourself to be carried away by the silent, peaceful tide of the night. The final remnants of thought now begin to thin out, like mist dissipating in the morning sun. The narrative we have followed has now fully dissolved, leaving behind only a faint, pleasant afterglow, a sense of having been somewhere beautiful and interesting. This feeling is all that is needed now. It is a gentle warmth, a soft blanket for the mind. There is no need to cling to it. It is simply there, a subtle comfort as you drift. The boundary between your inner world and the outer world becomes less distinct. The sounds in your room, the temperature of the air, the weight of your blankets, these all become part of a single, unified field of sensation. And your own sense of self, the I that has been listening and thinking, begins to expand and soften. You are not just a body lying in a bed. You are the stillness in the room. You are the darkness behind your eyes. You are the quiet rhythm of your own breathing. This expansion is a release from the narrow confines of the ego. It is a state of deep peace and interconnectedness. In this state, there are no problems to be solved, no tasks to be completed. There is only the simple, profound fact of existence, being here, now, and that is enough. The body continues its descent into deeper and deeper relaxation. The muscles, having let go of their tension, now feel wonderfully heavy and inert. The nervous system, having been soothed by the steady cadence of the story, is now calm and settled. The heart rate is slow and regular. The breath is shallow and effortless. The body is in a perfect state of readiness for sleep. It is a safe harbor, a quiet anchorage for the night. And the mind, having been gently guided away from its usual worries and preoccupations, is now content to be still. It is like a well-trained animal, lying down quietly by the fire, its work for the day complete. There may be a few last, stray thoughts, like sparks from the dying embers of the fire, but they have no energy. They rise for a moment, and then they disappear into the vast, dark chimney of the night. You are now at the very edge of the great ocean of sleep. You can hear the gentle lapping of its waves. You can feel its cool, inviting spray. There is no need to jump in. There is no need to swim. You can simply allow the tide to rise, to gently lift you, and to carry you away from the shore. The transition is seamless. There is no moment of crossing over. You simply drift. And at some point, without you even noticing, you are no longer drifting. You are asleep. You are home. The palace of history is now dark and quiet. The great figures of the past are sleeping in their tombs. The dramatic events have been folded away into the pages of books. The echoes of their voices have faded into the silence of the centuries. All that remains is the deep, resonant peace of a story that has found its conclusion. This peace is now your own. It is a gift from the past, a quiet inheritance that you can carry with you into your dreams. The complexities of Elizabeth's reign, the tangled web of her relationships, the heavy burden of her crown, all these have been resolved into a simple, profound stillness. This stillness permeates your mind, your body, your very being. It is a healing balm, smoothing away the rough edges of the day, quieting the restless chatter of the mind. In this stillness, there is a sense of profound safety. The world outside, with all its demands and uncertainties, recedes to a distant murmur. Here, in this inner sanctuary, you are protected. You are at peace. You are free. There is nothing left to hold on to. No thoughts to think. No images to see. The screen of the mind is dark. The theater is empty. The audience has gone home. There is only the vast, silent, and benevolent darkness. This darkness is not frightening. It is comforting. It is the darkness of the deep earth, of the silent cosmos, of the womb. It is a darkness that nurtures, that restores, that heals, and you can allow yourself to dissolve into this darkness, to become one with it, to let it hold you, support you, and carry you through the long, peaceful hours of the night. There is no past here. There is no future. There is only this eternal, present moment of deep, profound rest. The story is over. The journey is complete. Your only destination now is sleep. And you arrive there, effortlessly, gently, and completely. Good night. The last vestiges of the story have now become part of the quiet architecture of your mind as you sleep. The figures of Elizabeth and Robert are no longer active characters, but have become like ancient statues in a forgotten garden of your subconscious. They are silent, still, and imbued with a sense of timeless peace. Their complex lives, their passions, and their politics have been distilled into a simple essence of human experience, a quiet backdrop to your own restorative rest. The sensory details we explored, the scent of beeswax, the feel of velvet, the sound of a lute, may now resurface in the abstract landscapes of your dreams, not as a narrative, but as fleeting textures and tones, adding a richness and depth to your inner world without disturbing your peace. The world outside your window continues its own quiet turn through the night. But here, in your own personal space, time has slowed to a near standstill. The frantic pace of the day has given way to the slow, deep rhythm of sleep. This is a sacred time, a time for the body to repair, for the mind to sort and file, and for the spirit to be replenished. You are now far from the shores of conscious thought. You are navigating the deep, mysterious waters of the unconscious, a realm where logic gives way to symbol, and where healing happens on a level far below your waking awareness. The gentle irony and quiet melancholy of Elizabeth's story may now translate into a feeling of gentle acceptance, a quiet understanding that life is a mixture of joy and sorrow, of triumph and loss, and that there is a deep and abiding beauty in this complexity. This understanding requires no thought. It is simply absorbed, like a nutrient, into your being. The weight of your body is a comforting anchor, holding you securely in this state of profound rest. Each breath is a soft, gentle wave, washing over you, cleansing you, carrying you deeper into tranquility. You are completely safe. You are profoundly at peace. There is nothing to do but to continue to receive the gift of this deep and uninterrupted sleep. The story has done its work. It has been the key that unlocked the door to this quiet chamber of rest. Now, you can discard the key. The door is wide open, and you are free to wander in the peaceful, silent halls of your own inner world for the rest of the night. The stillness deepens. The silence becomes more profound. You are now immersed in the deepest, most restorative phases of sleep. The journey through Elizabethan England is a distant memory, a faint star in a far-off galaxy. The Queen and her court are gone. The palaces are empty. All that is left is the echo of a feeling, a sense of having been touched by a story of great depth and humanity. This feeling is a gentle undercurrent, supporting your sleep, enriching it without disturbing it. In this deep state, the body is performing its nightly miracles. Cells are being repaired. Tissues are being rejuvenated. The immune system is being strengthened. The brain is cleansing itself of the metabolic byproducts of a day's thinking. This is a process of profound, unconscious intelligence, a wisdom that resides within your very cells. You don't need to do anything to make this happen. You only need to provide the condition for it, and that condition is deep, uninterrupted rest. You have given yourself this gift. The mind, too, is engaged in its own quiet work. The experiences of the day, the information taken in, the emotions felt, all are being processed, integrated, and stored. The narrative of Elizabeth's life, with its themes of love, duty, and sacrifice, may be providing a useful framework for your mind to make sense of its own experiences. The subconscious speaks in the language of stories and symbols, and you have given it a rich and beautiful one to work with. But this is all happening far below the surface. On the surface, there is only peace, a vast, calm, and empty expanse of pure being. You are formless, timeless, thoughtless. You are pure awareness, resting in a state of profound and silent bliss. This is the essence of true rest. It is a return to the source, a dip in the well of life itself. And you can remain in this state, undisturbed, for as long as you need. The night is long and generous, and you have all the time in the world to drink your fill of this deep, healing peace. As the night continues its silent, steady passage, you remain in this sanctuary of deep sleep. The world of the Tudors is now a universe away, a closed book on a dusty shelf in the vast library of the past. The characters have long since faded. The narrative has dissolved completely. All that is left is a subtle impression, a feeling of richness and depth that has been absorbed into the very fabric of your being. This is how stories work on us when we sleep. They bypass the critical, conscious mind and speak directly to the deeper, more intuitive parts of ourselves. They don't teach us with facts, but they enrich us with feeling. They don't demand our attention, but they offer us a landscape to rest in. And you have rested in a landscape of great beauty and complexity. You have walked in the shadow of crowns and felt the weight of history. And in doing so, you have been gently carried away from the small concerns of your own immediate world. This sense of perspective is one of the most profound benefits of deep rest. The mind, unburdened by its daily anxieties, can expand into a larger sense of self, a self that is connected to the great, ongoing stream of human history. This connection is comforting. It is grounding. It reminds you that you are part of something much bigger than your own individual life. But even this thought is now too complex. The mind has moved beyond concepts, beyond connections. It has moved into a state of pure, simple existence, a state of being, not doing, a state of rest, not effort. Your body is a still and silent vessel, anchored in the calm harbor of the night. Your mind is a clear and empty sky, vast and without limit. This is a state of perfect equilibrium, a state of profound rejuvenation, and you can continue to marinate in this peace, to soak in this tranquility, for as long as the night allows. There is nowhere else to be, nothing else to do. Only this. This deep, profound, and utterly peaceful sleep. The journey of the night is now approaching its deepest point, the nadir of quiet and stillness. The external world is a distant rumor. The internal world of thought is completely silent. You are in the heart of the great void of sleep, a place of immense power and peace. Here, the raw materials of life are being replenished. Your energy stores are being refilled. Your mind is being cleared and reset. This is the great reset button of nature, and you are pressing it completely. The story that brought you here has served its purpose beautifully. It was a vessel, a carefully constructed ship, designed to navigate you through the turbulent waters of wakefulness and deliver you to this calm, deep ocean. The ship has now dissolved, its timbers of narrative and character melting away into the water, leaving you floating, weightless and free. You are pure potential. You are unbound by story, by identity, by time. This is a state of profound freedom and liberation. It is the ultimate letting go. There is no trace of Elizabeth, no shadow of Robert Dudley. Their world of intrigue and passion has been replaced by a world of absolute simplicity. The simplicity of the breath, the simplicity of the heartbeat, the simplicity of a body at rest. This simplicity is the essence of health. It is the foundation of well-being, and you are immersed in it completely. The gentle, melancholic tone of our story has perhaps left a subtle residue, a feeling of gentle acceptance of the imperfections and sorrows of life. This feeling is not a sadness, but a kind of wisdom, a quiet understanding that beauty and sorrow are often intertwined, and that a life fully lived contains both. But even this gentle feeling is now fading, replaced by something even more fundamental, a sense of pure, uncomplicated peace. This peace is your true nature. It is the ground of your being, and sleep is the process of returning to it, night after night. So continue to rest in this peace, to be this peace. Let it saturate every cell, every fiber of your being. The night is your kingdom now, and its only law is rest. As we move through the final phase of this long night's journey, the deepest peace continues to hold you. The world is quiet. Your mind is still. Your body is in a state of profound and healing rest. The tale of the Virgin Queen and her impossible love has long since faded, like a dream upon waking, leaving behind only an intangible sense of richness, a quiet patina on the surface of your sleeping mind. This is the power of a story well told and gently received. It acts as a kind of ballast, giving weight and stability to your journey into the unconscious, preventing you from being tossed about by the usual flotsam and jetsam of your own thoughts. It has anchored you in a different time, a different world, and in doing so, it has freed you from the moorings of your own. Now, in this deep, untroubled state, the true magic of sleep unfolds. The mind is not just resting, it is reorganizing, creating new connections, pruning old ones, making sense of the world in its own silent, mysterious way. You are learning and healing in your sleep, in ways your conscious mind can never fully comprehend. The story of Elizabeth, a story of immense self-control, of balancing personal desire with public duty, may be resonating in your subconscious, offering a quiet model of strength and resilience. The story of her lifelong, complicated love for Dudley may be offering a model of enduring connection, of a bond that transcends circumstance. These are not lessons to be learned, but energies to be absorbed. And you are absorbing them now, in the quiet alchemy of sleep. There is no need for any effort on your part. The process is automatic, instinctual. You are a part of the great, natural rhythm of the universe, the cycle of activity and rest, of day and night, and you have surrendered to it completely. So let the peace continue. Let the silence deepen. Let the healing complete itself. The night is a gentle, loving parent, holding you in its arms, and you can rest there, completely, until the first faint light of a new day calls you back to the world, refreshed, restored, and whole. The deepest part of the night holds you in its embrace. All stories are gone. All thoughts have ceased. There is only the profound, silent rhythm of your being. In this space, there is no queen, no court, no kingdom. There is only the simple, fundamental reality of your own existence, resting and renewing itself. This is a state beyond words, beyond concepts. It is the pure, undiluted essence of peace. Every breath is a wave of tranquility, washing through you. Every beat of your heart is a quiet drum, marking the steady, patient time of deep rest. The complexities of history, the dramas of human life, have all been simplified into this one, single point of stillness. This is the gift you have given yourself tonight. The gift of letting go, the gift of surrender, the gift of profound, uncomplicated rest. The narrative of Elizabeth's life, with its triumphs and its sorrows, has acted as a guide, leading you away from the noisy marketplace of your own mind and into this quiet, sacred cloister. Here, in the silence, the true restoration occurs. The body rebuilds, the mind clears, the spirit finds its center. You are being remade, renewed, from the inside out. You can trust this process completely. It is the oldest and wisest intelligence there is. It is the wisdom of life itself, and you are now fully immersed in it. So continue to float on this deep, dark, peaceful river. Let it carry you through the remaining hours of the night. There is nothing to fear. There is nowhere to fall. You are held, you are safe, you are at peace. The story is over. The silence is everything, and it is yours, completely and utterly, until morning. The long night is drawing to a close, but you remain cradled in the deep comfort of sleep. The journey through the past is complete. The historical figures have returned to their slumber. The grand tapestry of Elizabeth's reign has been rolled up and stored away. What remains is a quiet sense of fullness, a feeling of having been nourished by a story that was both grand and deeply human. This feeling is now part of the quiet landscape of your inner world, a gentle foundation upon which your own dreams have been built. As the first hints of dawn begin to lighten the sky outside, your body and mind are completing their final cycles of restoration. The deepest work is done. The mind has been cleared, the body has been healed, and your energy reserves have been replenished. You are like a ship that has been in dry dock all night, being repaired and repainted, and is now ready to be gently lowered back into the water of a new day. But there is no rush. The transition from sleep to wakefulness can be as gentle and slow as the transition from wakefulness to sleep. You can linger in this pleasant, in-between state, this soft, dreamy borderland. Here, the peace of the night still lingers, but the promise of the morning is beginning to be felt. The story of Elizabeth may have left you with a subtle appreciation for the passage of time, for the beauty of endurance, and for the quiet strength required to navigate a complex life. These are not thoughts, but feelings. A quiet confidence, a sense of perspective, a gentle wisdom. These are the gifts you can carry with you into your day. But for now, there is only rest. A few more moments, or hours, of this profound and peaceful slumber. The world can wait. Your peace is paramount. The queen is at rest. The kingdom is quiet. And you are sleeping, deeply and soundly, in the calm and gentle harbor of the night. The cycle of the night is complete. You have traveled far, from the bustling, sunlit world of the waking mind, through the shadowy, intriguing corridors of Tudor England, and into the deep, silent, and starless space of profound sleep. You have witnessed a story of love and power, of sacrifice and endurance, and you have allowed that story to gently ferry you across the waters of consciousness into a state of deep, restorative peace. Now, the journey is over. The boat has reached its final shore. The characters have faded. The narrative has dissolved. All that is left is the quiet, calm, and refreshed reality of your own being. The body, having rested, is now filled with a quiet, potential energy. The mind, having been cleared of its clutter, is now calm and spacious. You are ready for a new day, but there is no hurry to begin it. You can linger here, in this peaceful state, for as long as you need. The peace you feel is your own. The story was just a key, a tool to help you unlock it. The peace was within you all along, and now you know the way back to it. The path is quiet, it is gentle, and it is always available to you. So rest now, in the final, precious moments of the night. Rest in the knowledge that you are whole, you are complete, and you are at peace. The Queen has found her rest, and so have you. Good night.